I just played several hours of the new Deadrop Founders Test build, and I'm here to give you my first impressions. The gunplay and movement have been completely overhauled, new weapons have been added, new maps have been thrown in the mix, and the good news is, even though this is a singularly focused test build of the game that will become Deadrop, the combat and movement have both taken a huge step forward. I loved it, I'm psyched, and I'm here to give you my thoughts, all while footage from the new build plays on screen. If you're looking for a video that breaks down every single thing announced by Midnight Society recently about this build and the future of VES, check out my last video. And if you're wondering how to play this Founders Test build, how to get in on the action, you can basically either be a variant now, you just have to opt in your Founders profile, or buy a Founders Pass on OpenSea. Just be careful and follow the instructions in the Midnight Society Discord. Remember that Deadrop is planned for early access release on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation later this year as a full-fledged free-to-play game. Also remember that this is a test build, nothing is final first of all, and also remember that the current TDM test model is focused on testing the combat and movement. Many of the things will be very different in VES compared to this TDM test build. You know, even the maps, the spawns, the claw versus rat engagements, it's all going to be very different in the actual main game of Deadrop, which is the vertical extraction shooter mode, than a team deathmatch that's been created just for this focus test. Alright, let's start with the gunplay, which is a big win. All the weapons have been totally reworked, they have more recoil, and it takes more control to actually use them. All the weapons have been rebalanced, there's more of a skill gap for sure. It is no longer easy to just beam somebody across the map with an AR, an SMG, an LMG. There's actual recoil control, especially when you get to those medium or long range engagements. It's a little bit harder to hit your shots, which is great. All the guns have brand new, well, some of the guns already had final-ish models, pretty close, but basically all the gun models have been brought forward. They look basically ready to go. There's new animations for virtually all of them. You know, the heavy pistol, you can see the revolver chamber spinning. The range shotgun has some new animations with the piston, and there's even more great surprises here. But all in all the weapons feel viable and they feel useful. The auto pistol got the update that I always wanted it to. It feels a bit like a run-and-gun Uzi. Also has a really cool new model. The double barrel and the auto shotgun both have been improved. They were essentially broken in Snapshot 7 and Snapshot 7.5. There's so many variations of the guns, which we're going to get into in a second. I did not expect that to make it into this build. Midnight Society announced these weapon manufacturers in their blog posts, but I thought, well, that'll come in VES or whatever. No, it's here now, and we'll talk more about that in a second. The SMG is definitely more balanced. They brought down the magazine size there. Shotguns do seem to have a small hit registration inconsistency, but they still do feel better as a whole. By the way, I love the absolute unit that the double barrel now is, just because of its the model alone. It looks so freaking cool. Bring back Snapshot 5 double barrel, by the way. The only gun that I have like a serious problem with right now, the only real lame duck, is the LMG, which also got a new model. But the iron sights on it just aren't any good. I mean, in my opinion, there's really no good reason to use this thing. You can't really put a lot of fire down range with it and like aim it at somebody. Obviously, this is all this is going to change in VES, you know, with different sights put on these guns, with different attachments, the weapon rarities come into play. But right now in this Founders Test build, I generally don't like LMGs in video games in general, but this right now, because all the other guns feel so viable and useful, the LMG just isn't. It needs a sight. It needs an iron sight rework, something like that, to be usable in my opinion. The only weapon that I can't really speak on yet is the sniper, because we're playing on smaller maps. For the most part, there's not a lot of opportunity to snipe, and for whatever reason in this build, the sniper does not have a scope on it at all, so you're always no-scoping your iron sighting. It seems like it's been slowed down a tiny bit. I haven't used it enough, and again, in VES, the main mode of the game, there's now this system where you can have one primary, one secondary, and a melee weapon, so you're really going to be trying to hold distance with a sniper rifle for the most part anyway. I can't speak to it. The sniper rifle has been integral to Deadrop's kind of identity thus far. I obviously want it to stay very strong, very intimidating. I just can't speak to it yet. I gotta put it more through the ringer and have an opportunity to actually snipe, you know. Then we get this gun manufacturer system, which is cool, creates diversity and some personal preference as well. So if you're not familiar, this was detailed in the Midnight Society blog post. All the weapons, or some of them at least, have different variations from different weapon manufacturers. There's one called Nova in there. I believe there's one called VCS. And they all have little different features. They have slightly different looks, you know, different like iron sights, for example, slightly different models. But they all actually function a little bit differently too. And one of the really cool features about some of these is that some of them have different alternate fires. So this was probably one of my favorite features that they snuck in here. And I'm a huge Gears of War fan, by the way. One of the assault rifles, I think there's maybe 3 different versions of the assault rifle now, has a bayonet on it. So if you hit B on mouse and keyboard, you can actually run around with this thing with a bayonet and stab people to death with it. And then there's a shotgun that also has an axe, like underside. Like you flip it upside down and it's like you're swinging an axe, and you can walk up and melee people with this thing. You know, a lot of people have been talking about melee weapons in Deadrop for a long time. I think we'll still get to melee weapons, but this is a really cool step in that direction, being able to take your gun and turn it into a melee weapon, and it just feels really badass, feels brutal when you pull it off. It's awesome. I love this. More stuff like this. I like to see them expand the alternate fires as well, because not every gun right now has an alternate fire. But again, I know Quindel Hoyo worked on the Gears of War franchise. This has got, you know, his influence all over it. He is a creative director at Midnight Society, by the way, if you did not know. Love this, more of it. But as far as the different gun manufacturers, again, this has already drastically increased the number of kind of different functioning weapons in the pool, and this is eventually going to be, you know, in the loot pool in VES, which is only a good thing. And I do feel like this is a way better approach than like the Escape from Tarkov system, where you've got, you know, all these weapons that use different ammo types and different attachments and so on and so forth. Then you guys know it gets wildly complex and complicated. I didn't love that. Some people do. I feel like this is much more accessible, and none of the guns feel, you're never going to get confused. That like everything, there's a lot of diversity here and a lot of personal preference and choice, but nothing ever feels overwhelming. It's easy to tell, hey, this is an assault rifle. All right, next, let's talk about the movement. There were big changes here. Again, all positive. I like it. The base speed has slowed down. Your sprint speed, you know, is definitely a tiny bit slower. It's nothing like, you know, slowing down to the levels of other extraction shooters. And there's actually ways to speed yourself up, which I'll explain in a minute, which I love. But in general, the base movement speed has been slowed down a tiny bit. So, you know, people are a little bit easier to shoot. You're not running around like a madman most of the time. Slide has definitely been improved. You do gain some speed and some momentum from that. Ladders are generally easier to use. You don't have to hit a button to like latch onto it, which is good. But there are still some weird like interactions with ladders, it seems. Like when you get to the top rung and you're trying to pull yourself up, there's some weird glitches there. I'm sure that'll get smoothed out. And the new mantling feature is very smooth. I definitely think it's more fluid. Even though I loved ledge grabbing, which is kind of still there as the mantling thing, it's a little hard to translate and interpret right now, but I'm not really finding any issues with it, at least on these maps, which don't have a ton of vertical gameplay. But the new movement as a whole, I think, does feel more polished. It does move the game closer to that finalized feeling. But then we got the adrenaline system for the claws, which is awesome. Again, this is like the anti-Tarkov thing. If you're playing as a claw, the more you fight, the more kills you are getting, the faster you're going to move. Like, it actually changes your adrenaline level, and it lets you know on screen if you're pumped, if you're juiced. Those are actual terms, by the way. Your ADS works faster. I love this. It really rewards aggressive gameplay and playing, you know, being able to, even though the base game has slowed down a tiny bit, you really can work yourself up and you know, pull off those crazy plays and kind of be that killing machine. Then there is the rat movement. And if you didn't know this, the old sins have been changed to what's called rats, robotic acquisition team. That's what it is. This movement is awesome. So when you play as a rat, you move faster and you have way more mobility options. So you can kind of literally climb up walls a certain distance, and claws can do this a bit too, but rats can climb way higher. That's like a big deal. There's a vent system on Sector 2, which was kind of like snuck into this playtest that they didn't really tell us about. There's an actual Sector 2 map which you can play on, which we assume, of course, will be in VES when it's finished. It's just a block out version, but it is there. So as a rat, you can actually climb into these vents and open and close them to kind of sneak above these areas and relocate, and it's really cool. I also killed a rat by throwing a grenade into the vents, because I knew he was up there, and that was highly entertaining, by the way. But the thing to remember here is, again, all this stuff is going to change in VES. So, right, for example, there's a battery life system with the rats, where you can only survive for so long without changing your battery, and you have to have a battery in order to do that. In Team Deathmatch, this doesn't matter at all. The system doesn't even, like, you're going to survive the whole time no matter what. But in an extraction shooter, which is what Deadrop will be, that changes. So right now in the Team Deathmatch format, it's a little bit different because you're playing as teams of claws and teams of rats. And I think right now the rats are by and large at a bit of a disadvantage because of the smaller health pool. But playing as rats is super fun if you take advantage of that higher movement speed. It's just in this Team Deathmatch format, if the claws are a formidable team, they're going to win a lot of the fights because they simply have a bigger health pool than you. But I think we're going to get, rat customization down the road, and it's going to play totally different in VES because you're not playing as teams. You're choosing what engagements to take, what positions to hold, or how to relocate. So that claw versus rat thing is going to be a totally different dynamic when you move into VES. But I really like playing as a rat. It feels like kind of how I play Snapshot 7 and Snapshot 7.5, with a high octane play style. Just sprinting around everywhere, mantling, jumping off things. Oh, that's kind of the rat play style. You're very quick on your feet, constantly moving. It feels really good. Some of the features of the Sector 2 map that I just want to point out that are really cool, which were not in previous builds. Again, the Team Deathmatch mode on Sector 2 does feel a little weird because it's kind of it's a map designed for an extraction shooter, whereas the other maps are kind of designed for Team Deathmatch. There's actually some security cameras on this map, which once you walk into them, it alerts other players that you are there, and players can see, okay, you've been picked up by the security camera, and it tracks you until you're out of its sight. I think that's going to be a really cool feature. I assume maybe that's going to be like a high loot tier area or something, some risk reward of sneaking in there and trying to get some loot and get picked up by this camera. And again, the vent system that I pointed out is on this map. That's a new thing for the game that we've seen so far. The Rat Warehouse map, by the way, which was designed just for TDM, just for this test, for this Founders Test build. This is like a traditional FPS map. It's just block out stages, but it's really good. Moving around this map feels really good. It's like a Deadrop playground. Like Canyon is pretty cool, right? But Rat Warehouse is by and large a better quality map. It's like I said, it's not arted, it's not block out, but it's actually fun to play in this format, in the Team Deathmatch format. So I know they said they don't plan to ship this map with Deadrop. They don't plan to art it. That's fine. My ask would be, let us make DCMs on this thing. Even if it's a blockout stage. Over at Viper UGC, we would love to make modes on this map and make and utilize it. So please, Midnight Society, if you're listening, you don't have to art it. Just give us a blockout version. We'll take care of the rest. So all in all, my first impressions are extremely positive. I think the gunplay and movement and just everything in this Founders Test build has taken a large step forward. It's not perfect yet. Remember, this is an in-development build, and it's not being tested yet in VES. But I do think that the next Founders Test build will likely be playing all of these things in VES, along with other features that have been designed specifically for VES, new gadgets, obviously loot pools, all this stuff, and I think that makes sense for the next thing. But and if you're interested in what they've already laid out for the future of VES, jump into that blog post on midnightsociety.com, and there's actually a ton there. We also got, obviously, the fully arted maps coming, more UGC tools. We'll actually be able to start collecting loot, kind of building our collections like you're supposed to do in an extraction shooter. The Midnight Ride to be re-implemented, the hideout to be finished. I kind of snuck the return of the work in progress hideout back in there. There's so much more to come, including on this channel. We're going to cover Deadrop and Midnight Society exclusively here until the end of time, so make sure you're subbed if you want to follow Deadrop and Midnight Society. I appreciate your viewership, guys. I've been working a lot between actual work, this new Founders Test build, we're working on our next live-action Deadrop short film, vacations. This summer's nuts. So, that's all I got to say. Thanks for watching. Mayor Reynolds out.